Hello, and welcome to part two of Local Writers Read August event. This month, our theme has been sticky situations. We started last night with Anthony Farr and Claire Guyton reading their pieces, and both of them dealing with the theme turned what should be simple car trips into much more complicated events due to circumstance. But sticky situations is really such a broad thing, from the personal and the uncomfortable to global things to the fantastic even. And so today we have three fantastic writers who are going to be sharing their work with us. And as always, I will be watching the stream throughout the event. So if you have comments, questions, feel free to chime in there. We'll have some time for discussion afterwards so we can share your thoughts with the readers as well. And so without further ado, I will turn things over to my co-organizer, Claire Guyton, to introduce today's readers.
Thank you, Josh. I just realized that all our guest readers this weekend are new friends to the series, so a special welcome to you all. So we'll start today with Michelle Menting, who is the author of Leaves Surface Like Skin from Terrapin Books and the chapbooks Residence Time and Myth of Solitude. A 2020 Maine Literary Award finalist, her recent essays appear in New Delta Review, Fourth River, New South, and Glass. And her poems have been featured in American Life and Poetry and Verse Daily. She lives in Midcoast, Maine, and teaches at USM. Nancy O'Toole Meservier will read after Michelle. Nancy is a sleep-deprived author, podcaster, blogger, and librarian in Central Maine. Her work includes the Red and Black series, a series of superhero fiction, and The Lady of the Watchtower, a forthcoming collection of fantasy short stories. She spends her off time reading, watching anime, playing video games, and serving as a referee for two prickly cats. Learn more about her at nancyotoolewordpress.com. Gibson Fay-LeBlanc will have the final word on sticky situations. His collection, Death of a Ventriloquist from UNT Press in 2012, won the Vassar Miller Prize and was featured by Poets and Writers as one of a dozen debut collections to watch. His poems have appeared in Granica, The New Republic, Tin House, Jubilat, Field, and on the PBS NewsHour Art Beat. His book, Dangle, Dazzle, Dive, is forthcoming from Cavan Carey Press next spring. So let's jump in. Again, it's Michelle, then Nancy, and then Gibson. So take it away, Michelle.
I'm going to start with a poem, and then I'm going to read a couple of flash nonfictions. So this first poem, or the poem, is titled Pavement, and I'll just start reading it. So, Pavement. That evening of summer, we walked, my sister and I, the new blacktop of her road, after the earth of that same road, a logging road, becomes sealed, civil, easy, with tarred petroleum. There we heard a chirping coming from the thicket, those grasping thorns that guard berries before berries. The sound was a trill on repeat, an offspring's noise, some baby's cry. Raccoons, 2 of them, just weeks old, a few months maybe, motherless for sure. Sometimes they come back, the moms, my sister said. Sometimes they leave to ward off danger, to tempt it farther into the woods, away from the kits. And sometimes they appear as lumps in the road a quarter-mile down. We walked, my sister and I. We looked up the blacktop and back to the dirt, the bramble ditch. The chirping grew louder. The kits had scrambled up the blacktop, claws clambering. How could something so small hold so much trust within its tiny heart? One baby, then the other, the 2 of them following the 2 of us as we searched for their mother. We decided to wait, to let the babies wait, to see if their mother would return before taking a cat carrier full of ringtails to wildlife rescue. The trilling continued. We led the kits back towards the woods, past the brambles, back to their tree. The next morning, the trilling again, but lighter, slighter, and only single. He was still there near the thicket, that oak tree, one of the kits. But to the side of the road, maybe 10 feet up, his sibling, the one not spared. The body intact, curled, so trusting. The head dented and sloped, as if struck by intentional impact. Evidence of tire tracks where we needlessly, purposefully were grooved into the dirt. Sometimes they aim. My sister once said this, or I once said this, I don't remember. It happens so often. What does it mean when repetition makes memories fade rather than tattoos them forever into your mind? With grapes and kibble, we encouraged the trilling kit into the carrier. We placed the plastic cage in my sister's Honda. We closed the door on his hungry cries, and we walked back along the road to scoop the dead kit into the gallon ice cream bucket we used for picking berries. We'd bury her later, beneath spruce and hemlock, cinnamon ferns, away from pavement. Apologize for the sadness. So it's a poem, it's lineated, but it's based on a real event occurrence, and one that, I guess it's a sticky situation in a number of ways. I'm gonna use bad humor here because obviously it's roadkill, which is awful and sometimes sticky. But as well, it's just when we heard that raccoon, that baby, you don't want to act too soon, right? You don't want to take babies away from their mother, especially wildlife in the woods, because the mom always comes back. And so it was just all that apprehension, and it was very nerve-wracking to think that we're not doing anything, we're not helping, they're so close to the road, and yet we didn't want to, cause more strife by taking the kits away. So I still think of it, it still angers me, but yeah, so I will move on to a more pleasant memory. And this one is actually about memory, and it's a flash nonfiction piece called To Ward Off, to Conjure. To ward off, to conjure. I'm eating raw garlic again, whole bulbs of cloves that with a knife press fully and with conscience, enough thought for the outer skin to flip out a corner. I can pick, peel back, expose the slivered white claws. It's enough, this flavor of hot memory, of summers out back, of walking the trail from the house to the desperate garden, of following enchantment. Eat whole cloves to keep mosquitoes away. They don't like the scent. Eat it raw to ward off the ticks. It throws off their radar for the flow in your veins. When you're 8 and taught 2 spears of heat will keep away what wants your blood, that tends to stay in your thoughts. Old wives' tale or true woods medicine, its power saturates through once you hear the words. I return to it every year, every hot day, when I ache to go back to those woods, the hemlock trail that seemed so long, the one that led me from the ramshackle cabin, the one I took with my sisters to watch our mother while she planted tomatoes and sweet corn the deer would eat anyway, despite the paper plates coated with dog hair and tacked to the posts. Another deterrent, folktale or real, what did it matter? We all love the process. Brushing the dogs and tacking their fur to paper plates on posts. We all love the magic too, the imagined power. Each one of us a mini sorcerer, wizarding spells, warding off the creatures who wanted us most. We'd secretly hoped they'd come. Those demons of ticks, phantoms of mosquitoes, deer of daring, and that we'd get to witness their surprise at our more awesome powers. As part of the spell, we'd script 4 legs befriend, wings and needles take flight, 8 legs end. It made no sense, and all the sense. The ticks, the mosquitoes, the deer, even the rabbits. Decades later, the spell becomes prescription each summer I refill. Take 2 cloves to repel what pest might ail you. Peel back and swallow a bulb to transport to the ache of a garden, the memory you lived the most. I grew up in a large family and have several siblings and many sisters, 6 sisters, 5 brothers. So it's a large family. And so I tend to write about that a lot, the experiences and memories I have of them and with them. So this last nonfiction I'll read is another memory having to do with siblings. And it is called On Kicking My Sister in the Stomach. And there's a little subtitle, which is subjects covered: sibling play, sibling fighting, sibling, Jean-Claude Van Damme, shock and surprise. I was barely 10 and she a teenager. And it wasn't a soft kick, but a showing off my dancing skills roundhouse Van Damme kick to her gut. It stuck. I swiveled, then lifted, felt my hip reflexor curl and tighten before my legs sprang out, made contact. A direct hit where her pajama top met the elastic of her pants. She first held her ground, stunned in surprise, or more likely steadfast in defiance. Was she shocked still from the impact or from my motivation? She then crumpled forward, groaned, breathy and light. I hadn't meant to hurt her. We hadn't hit one another before. That kick, I don't know why I did it. I remember this. We were laughing so hard, our eyes were runny, our noses were runny, and we swallowed back snot in salty gulps. I remember this. The burst of energy was slow at first, rose from whatever play we were doing, like a scene in a story, rising action built to climax, but then a pause, like that breeze before a storm. No less cliche, just a pause. Like everything went quiet and dark before the muscles from Brussels took possession of a 10-year-old in our tiny living room. That guy, the constant guest of our brothers, but rented, muted, and in micro, silently splitting and kicking on our TV through rented VCR. I remember this. I wanted to show off. Not as a fighter, not as someone who knew any martial art, because I didn't know any. No, I wanted to show off, to show I could kick that high, could balance that still that long, to show strength existed in my spindly legs, to show maybe even some talent. There were so many of us. Maybe I thought a kick would define me, differentiate me from my sister P, sister J, sister K, K2, B, and D, and brother M, brother P, brothers G, J, and T. And maybe it did stick, that kick. Maybe I wanted to show surprise, that I could surprise, oh my, smack stick. And maybe, but who knows then, and can anyone know now? P, J, K, D, M, K2? Part of me wanted to kick just for the sake of shock. Well, another part, leg, simply wanted to hit because I hadn't hit before. Maybe I reached the age when somehow hitting felt good. We didn't have that sort of relationship, my sister P and I, nor J and I, or K and I, or B, D, K2 and I. Not ever before the kick, not ever after. I was surprised I kicked. She was surprised I kicked her. We can't remember the why. Why kick? Only the impact of the what, the smack, the stuck. Surprise doesn't fade or spoil. Like a kick, it sticks. And that's all I have for you today. So thank you for having me on here. This is really wonderful. And our next reader is Nancy Meservier.
Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate the fact that you ended with kind of a youthful perspective, because my selection is very different, but it has a similar youthful protagonist. I'm going to be reading from The Paper Doll, which is like a young adult fantasy short story. And she is 12 years old, so I thought it was appropriate. But, okay. By the time she was 12 years old, Lya Darkwood was very familiar with the word no. This was particularly true when it came to the topic of advanced magic. She was used to the sight of golden spells hanging around her teacher like tiny twinkling stars. Still, whenever she asked to help, Madame Lawrence's response was always the same. Not yet, Lya. No, you need to master simple spells first. Stop bothering me. Don't you have work to do? In truth, Lya was not impatient or even overly curious, but after months of tracing out only the simplest of blue magic, the need to push forward, to at least try something more, was beginning to overwhelm her. So when a customer brought in a large, dusty spell book that he claimed had belonged to his grandfather, Lya couldn't keep her eyes away. Before Madame Lawrence could examine it, a rich client, Lord Levi de Alms, summoned her away, leaving Lya to watch the shop alone. The massive tome was left untouched on the front table. Lya approached it with outstretched hands. Even though it hadn't been used in years, a faint glow of power emanated from its pages. Elaborate magical symbols had been carved onto the cover, crafted from fine-grained wood. Lya ran her fingers over one of the carvings. It looked like the symbol for transformation, only something about it wasn't quite right. Lya started at the sound of a jingling bell. She turned to see a tall, dark-haired teenage boy enter through a front door, a long wooden box tucked neatly under one arm. Upon seeing Lya, he smiled. The expression lit up his tanned face and seemed to make the green in his eyes brighten. Delivery for Madame Lawrence, he said, holding up the box. But seeing as you're not a 70-something crone, I take it you're not her. Lya could not help but blush a little. Although he was clearly a few years older than she, he was rather handsome. She reached up to tug a lock of her long, wavy brown hair, silently cursing her decision to put it up in pigtails that morning. How childish she must look. No, I'm not, Lya replied, but I can give it to her. Sorry, orders are not to let this one leave my sight until I pass it on to the mage. The boy patted the side of the box with his free hand. Lya couldn't help but jump when the box jerked in response. Pesky little thing, the boy said with a shrug. Well, I may not be Madame Lawrence, but I am a mage. Are you now, girl? He raised an eyebrow. Apprentice, I assume? Well, yes, Lya frowned. And my name isn't girl, it's Lya Darkwood, boy. Realization lit up the customer's face. His mouth opened into a wide O shape. The same Darkwoods that founded the city, he asked. Of course. And what a fool I've been. The boy rubbed the back of his head. Pardon me, Lady Lya. He reached forward and took her right hand in his spare one, leaning over it with a courtly bow that seemed mocking, given their humble surroundings. Lya winced. Not a lady, she replied before he could speak further. At least, well, the Darkwoods used to run this place, but not anymore. You seem ladylike enough to me. My name is Paige, by the way. Just Paige? Surnames are a burden for those unmemorable first ones. But isn't Paige normally a girl's name? Of course, and lovely and clever girls they must be to have such a wonderful name. A small laugh escaped Lya's lips. What a clown this boy was. Well, Madame Lawrence isn't going to be back for at least an hour. You can return then or stay here if you want. Lya paused and gestured toward the book on the table. It seems to be a popular day for deliveries. Paige walked toward the table and glanced over the book. A low whistle escaped his lips. Book of Transformation, he said in a low voice. A rare find indeed. He paused and turned his head and shoulders toward Lya. People just drop off priceless materials like this and leave? Well, most non-magic weavers don't know what they have on them, Lya replied. But how do you know what it is? Are you a mage? No, but in my profession, it's good to know about items of value. Paige reached out and rested a hand on the cover. Lya felt herself pale. She invited a thief into the shop. She felt her right hand involuntarily jerk toward the book. Don't you worry your pretty little head, he replied with a small smile. I'm only dropping something off today. Well, maybe you shouldn't be touching it. Books of transformation need an activation spell to work, except for the few that require blood. He paused. Don't you want to see what's inside? Yes, Laya said. It's just Madame Lawrence was very specific about not touching it. Madame Lawrence isn't going to be here for another hour, right? Plenty of time for a quick peek. He reached for the metal clasp that held the book shut. Wait. Laya reached for the book, hoping to tug it away. The sound of the clasp unhinging filled the air. Laya felt a small, sudden pain across her hand. She hissed and drew back. She heard a sharp intake of breath from Paige. Turning her hand palm up, she found a cut, less than half an inch long, across her pointer finger. Red blood welled from underneath. Oh, the playfulness drained from Paige's eyes. They turned toward the book in unison. A single drop of blood could be found on the jagged metal clasp. Without warning, the room grew dark, as if the shutters had been drawn. Laya took a step back. I am such an idiot, Paige muttered under his breath. The book instantly came to life. The cover banged open and the pages began turning as if by a strong wind. Laya's mouth hung open as the papers were ripped from the spine. They scattered around the room, toppling over small books and sending crystals shattering to the ground. The pages plastered themselves against the walls and windows. Once the book had been emptied, the room grew eerily quiet. What a mess. Laya took a step forward. Wait. Paige grasped Laya's hand before she could touch anything. The swift movement made her jump. She had barely seen the nimble move. It's not done, he said in a low voice. As if in response to his words, Laya felt a small breeze brush across her cheek. Before she could speak, the breeze strengthened into a full wind, sending the papers flying around the room again. The wind quickly tightened into a funnel, drawing in the pages, bringing them closer and closer until they began to stick together in the center. Laya blinked in surprise as the hundreds of papers grew from an unidentifiable lump to the figure of a woman, her arms reaching up as if to shield her face. With every additional page, more details appeared, including the folds of a dress and curls of her hair. When the final page was set, the figure's chest expanded as if taking in a large breath. With his exhale, color emerged, painting her hair a golden blonde, her skin a fair cream, and her gown the deep blue of the ocean. Her eyes were stormy gray. She lowered her arms and blinked in surprise. For a moment, she was silent. Then her eyes rested on Paige. Oh, Jack, she gasped, thou hast returned. How cruel thou hast been to treat a maid as such. And with that, she threw herself at Paige and draped her arms over his neck, causing him to stumble back. Paige's eyes lit up with alarm. The box was nearly jostled from his grasp. Miss, Paige replied. Miss, I think you have me confused with someone else. Art thou not the trickster Jack? How darest thou lie to me, you knave, and after fighting so valiantly to win thine heart? The woman drew back and threw her face into her hands. The sobs that emerged were so loud that Laya took a step back. She glanced toward the near empty spine of the book. I swear, Paige said, voice strained. I don't know what she's talking about. I can barely understand her. She's talking like someone out of a story. Her dress is old-fashioned too, Laya replied. All of that embroidery and those elaborate braids. I don't think her dress is the issue. Perhaps it is. There was a single sheet of paper still resting in the book. Laya picked it up and held it high enough for Paige to read. It said, Jack and the Lady of the Waterfall. Oh, hells, Paige muttered under his breath. Jack and the Lady of the Waterfall was a story about the shape-shifting folk hero, Jack of Many Faces. He was famous for his tireless defense of the poor, as well as his multiple paramours. In the tale, Jack falls in love with a noble lady with long golden tresses. The lady is unable to resist his charms, but is trapped in an arranged marriage with a rich man. Jack slays her husband in an epic duel, allowing the two to fill their love. But by the end of the tale, Jack leaves town and forgets to tell the lady he will return. The lady, finding him gone, assumes she has been abandoned and drowns herself at the base of a waterfall. The light streaming through the paper revealed additional writing on the other side. Laya turned it over. Release me to win the heart of the fair maiden, she read aloud. What does that mean? Paige opened his mouth to reply, but the lady beat him to it. Why dost thou reject my love? Did not thou claim to love me? The intensity of her gaze caused Paige to take a step back. Sorry, he said. I think you have me confused with someone else. Maybe you should go back in the book and... At that, the lady let out a sob and ran toward the exit. As she yanked open the front door, a loud tear filled the room. The door slammed shut behind her. "She's still made of paper," Wyatt said, mouth agape. "But she looks so real." "Books of transformation are funny things," Paige replied. "The wizard that designed them originally wanted messengers that could deliver information accurately and be disposed of afterward. Unfortunately, no matter how real you make them look or feel, they're still paper and get damaged just as quickly. On top of that, they lack a person's ability to improvise. The subject of a book, or paper doll, will merely complete an assigned task over and over again. In the case of this one, it looks like she's playing out the end of the story. She's not going to drown herself, is he? In the biggest body of water she can find." Well, that's it for me. As you see, I chose something a little lighthearted for these dark times. And now I'm going to pass it on to Gibson.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Josh and Claire, for organizing this. It's a pleasure to read with Michelle and Nancy too. I think I'll read 4 poems. And these are all from my book that's coming out next spring, which is called Dangle Dive. And maybe give a little sense of where the book goes from the poems that I read. And they all do have a sticky situation of a kind in them. I was realizing more poems than at first I thought, I don't know if I can work with sticky situations, but plenty of my poems actually, I mean, it depends how you think of it, but there was plenty there. So this first one is called Hockey Poem, and I grew up playing hockey. I still play, and I also, have been writing poems for the last, I don't know, 25 years or so. So this poem is a way to get both of those things together, poetry and hockey. And I was trying to write a poem that for years that happened in a locker room. Hockey locker room is a very kind of fraught place. And then one day I was playing, I was suiting up for a game in an adult league, and somebody came in and said something that gave me the poem. So this is the poem, Hockey Poem. And you'll have to excuse an F-bomb or two. Hockey Poem. The goalie, 60s and fit, his graying mustache leapt as he spoke, said, "No fucking talk about books here," to 2 defensemen cinching shoulder pads. Sorry, to 2 defensemen breaking down a novel. The room, we were cinching shoulder pads, grabbing helmets, roared. If you haven't been in this locker room, here follows the list of subjects allowed. Sex lives with detail, deer or moose hunting, bar rooms, and hockey, kids, adults, professional, pond, women's. We're 21st century hockey players, I said. And then I read this wonderful poem the other day. We roared again. I wasn't kidding, but wanted the roar. Dear committees, keep your fucking medals for reading poems or writing them. Someday I'll deke that goalie, cat-like at 6 a.m. on a Thursday, swiveling, kicking out puck after puck. I'll crush a body, sprint the boards, and swing in front of him, show him the forehand twitch and switch and slip puck into net. Then I'll deliver lines on a man who finds and kisses his brother, and the goalie's heart will leap and flutter in the way he thought could never happen outside this brutal, beautiful game. So hockey poems are one strand in the book, and when I started writing this book, another strand, which you'll hear in this next poem, which has a little bit of hockey in it and other things. So I grew up with an older brother. We played hockey together, and this book also charts his about 8 years ago. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and just died a couple months ago after 8 years. And so that's in these poems as well. And this poem, The Sticky Situation, you'll hear. When we were younger, my brother would convince me occasionally to put on my hockey equipment so he could shoot pucks at me. Unwritten. In a poem I haven't written yet, my brother convinces me to put on hockey equipment, helmet to girdle to knee pads, and shoots and shoots and shoots in the driveway, the puck bouncing off me. In a poem I haven't written for my brother, but plan to, we throw haymakers on a hill. He headlocks me on grass. I whip hard balls at his back. We scratch and gouge until a boy jabs his finger at me and my brother swings at teeth too big for that kid's mouth. In the poem, I won't let myself write. I say why I haven't written it, listing to my left with a tonnage in the bulkhead of bullshit that shifted, before admitting that I will see him with a little brother's eye, looking through isinglass. In the poem that doesn't exist, I smile rather than ask why one summer he slogged at Gold Coast dogs and walked the beach alone. I number the cracked bricks in our apartments and admit all the nicknames he gave me, even G-string. I wish for red foothills, more hours we shared while our sons dueled with swords and wands and bikes and leapt from leaning forts. In the poem I don't write, and the one I'm left with, while the shadows of grander ones gesture on walls. You're worried from sleep, from phantom pain and real pain and scads of pills and insurance papers. And I get down on my knees and pray, Lee, to all I barely believe, because how else will there be decades ahead to be brothers? In this poem I don't write, then don't write more. I promise I won't only read sad brother poems, but the book is in part an extended elegy for my brother. There is a lot of domesticity in the book as well, because that's part of my life as well. Raising two boys. And this next poem is literally a sticky situation. And it's also a sesquina, which you don't really need to know, but it's a crazy, if you don't know it, it's a crazy form that poets write in when they want to make themselves crazy. Involves 6 different repeating words in different configurations over 6 stanzas, and then a little extra. So, self-portrait with dish rag. Some nights I slip on my brown leather boots after dinner and announce to the table I'm headed to a reading. I need magic thumping in my chest, those tintinnabulations in my inner ear. The table's probably sticky because no one cleans up their cantaloupe, and I hate finding the half-chewed cantaloupe after I've gone to hear those tintinnabulations and come back later to that hand-me-down table of wilting rinds and pools that drip on boots that Emmett calls writer boots for their magic that makes me taller even when they're sticky. Fingerprints on white trim, wood floor sticky with dried juice and pretzels crushed by boots that didn't see them set off tintinnabulations in my head. I want to control it all and can't. I want unbroken windows, clear floors, and table. I want the house to sweep itself like magic. I know a house can't clean itself by magic. The boys and wife all covet cantaloupe and all admire me in my writer boots because everyone's too busy for a sticky floor someone had better tintinnabulate the hell out of, along with the table. It might as well be me. A smooth table, dining chairs not soiled, walls not sticky, are all a way to tell the cantaloupe's drooping smiles that this family has magic. And look at me, under control, in boots, making the house sparkle like tintinnabulations, while the others sleep through tintinnabulations downstairs and dream of kid and doctor magic, which will make all the surfaces sticky again. Nothing is more than this table, where we four sit together with cantaloupe and talk at night. We don't need the boots. I know boots are not what holds the magic, and my sticky life above and below this table tintinnabulates with sweet, sweet cantaloupe. So I stole those end words from a student of mine because I thought they were great. So one last poem, and this is actually the last poem in my book, and is, I guess, kind of a hockey poem, and is also a kind of an elegy for my brother. Dive. A new tumor on his heart doesn't sound like the ones on other organs. On his heart. And now what treatment? Watch the clock. Follow a salt road out as far as its end. Remember he's still here? Send clips, a center's sick dangle, showing what he makes disappear. Or a wing who blurs by, blades and limbs, then spins 360 degrees outside time, spinorama. Send a heart emoji? In hockey, a dive is when a player acts hurt and falls so that the ref calls a penalty. Here, it's something else. A brother dazzles, annoys, enrages, awes, leads, is younger for 44 years. Then the elder begins a fall. Or maybe this descent only acted like other motion all along. Maybe all our motion is down. Where's the ref? What happens next in this moment? Then another, a center my brother skates off to find. Thank you.
Thank you all, Michelle and Nancy and Gibson. It's a delight to listen to your work and to just to have you willing to join us and to share on a Saturday afternoon and all this. I know for me, I'll say one thing that's interesting is we give these themes to the readers and then we just say like, do with it what you will. And it's always so interesting to see what people come back with new work that they're still revising, with things that have been published, but so many different interpretations and just kind of lenses to look at these things. I think today is a perfect example of all the different ways that you can take this and just run with it to say so much more. And so we're going to transition into our discussion a little bit. I know we have some questions. And I do want to give just a quick shout out to Courtney from Quiet City, who has been a partner for this series. She wasn't able to make it this month, but she is still very much a supporter of this, and hopefully we'll be back next time. And to anyone who is listening, I'm still watching the comments, so if you have any questions for our readers, feel free to chime in. But in the meantime, Claire, do you want to kind of kick us off?
Yeah, I will. Thanks. Before I forget, and in case we both forget, I also want to give a shout out to the Lewiston Public Library, which is a co-sponsor for Local Writers Read and happens to be the best place on the planet to work, Josh and I think. So, so thank you, LPL. Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same thing, Josh, about how sometimes when we give these themes out, we wind up with work that sort of weaves itself together in these surprisingly similar ways. And that's what happened last night, that Anthony's and my, even though our stories took very different forms, it was so surprising and interesting how the protagonist sort of started off with exactly the same kind of situation. And then today, as with other times we've done these themes, we are astonished at how different the work is. And it's a very different kind of quilt with different textures and colors. And I just love having themes. I think it allows us to sort of pull things together in a way that you just can't do without it. So, and just to get us started, first of all, Gibson, I was going to ask you about your book. You talked about it quite a bit already, but I think that I got the title wrong in the bio because it sounds like you said something different.
Yeah, so you probably saw it that way because I've changed the title. I've adjusted it a couple times, but the title is Deke, Dangle, Dive, and those are all words that come out of hockey and are in the poems. But there've been a few different configurations of them.
Well, you talked about dive. I don't know. So my husband is, by the way, obsessed with hockey and has been his whole life. So I can't wait to give him this book of poems. He's going to love it. But I've not heard the term deke, and I don't know how dazzle applies to hockey either. Yeah.
So deke is just really just a fake. It's like you hold the puck out one, over here, and then you swing it over there so that your opponent, can't keep up with you, basically. And then dangle is similar. Actually, if somebody dangles in hockey, you're like holding it out for the opponent to think that they might take it away from you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what you originally were going to use dazzle. What's dazzle in hockey?
Well, dazzle is just it's really just the same. There's no special meaning in hockey for dazzle. Just that, there is a lot of dazzle in hockey. I think that would be a word that people don't automatically associate with hockey. But if you watch it, it's a beautiful, beautiful game, and it's a fast moving, beautiful game when played well, I'll say. But yeah, so that's those are where that title comes from.
Okay, and I'm going to bother you just one more time before we jump around. Okay. You have to go into detail about how to write a sestinas for people who don't know the form, because it is so. I can't believe people do it. Yeah, so there's these 6 repeating words, and they repeat, but in a changing order for each of 6 stanzas. So you have 6 stanzas with the same 6 words ending those 6 lines in each of the 6 stanzas, but in different order. And then usually in a sestina, the lines are the same length roughly, but that sometimes is sometimes people don't do that. And then also there's a little coda, a 3-line coda at the end of the poem where you have to use all 6 words in those 3 lines. So it is a kind of as I said, it's a crazy form that will make you crazy, but also stretches your mind in interesting ways. And there's also I think almost every sestina there's because it's a 6 lines, 6 stanzas over, 6-line stanzas, 6 stanzas. There's some tedium built into every sestina too. So I think when you write one, it's how do I deal with that? Well, I was talking about doing domestic work around my house. I was yeah, tedium, that sounds about right. Yeah, you poets, I tell you. I don't know. That's great. Thank you. So I've got more questions, but I don't want to take up all the air. If anyone else has a question, jump in or comment.
Well, I think, one of the marks of a good sestina is you don't realize it's a sestina. And when you're reading that, I didn't realize it was a sestina. I heard the words, but it went together so well that it just didn't stick out as if you were trying to write a sestina. It was more like you were writing a poem that happened to be a sestina. So I really enjoyed that. Thanks, Michelle.
I was noticing that your poem about the kick, when I started reading my poem where my brother and I are just fighting like crazy, which, as the poem makes clear, was a regular occurrence, whereas I think your kick was not a regular occurrence. But still, I think that sibling violence, sibling fighting is a thing, and so I was feeling connect. I love that poem, and as you read it, and I was feeling the connection as I read mine.
Yeah.
I was feeling that connection too, because although I have not written about it, yeah, violence is in every sibling relationship, I think, one way or another, eventually, and we can laugh at it when we're adults, right?
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I liked about your first poem, Gibson, is you mentioned something about how you're 21st century hockey players or something like that, which had me thinking about my brother actually, because growing up he was always the jock and I was the reader. Like my mom talks about how he naturally reached for a basketball and I naturally reached for a book. But growing up, and just a year ago, he came to me and he like, hey, I know you've been writing these books. I wrote one. And it just completely blew me away because I would never, he's like, that's something I've always wanted to do. It has me thinking about how we like to put people in these neat little categories, but in actuality, like we're more than that. We cover like multitudes. So I like that little one. It was nice.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, I love that story. And it's so true, right? Any of us we contain multitudes. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna grab another one of my burning questions so Michelle, I was really interested when I read your work about how you sort of walk the line between poetry and essay. Everything's very lyrical. And I wondered, and then in particular, the piece, The Pavement, how that you did break it out like a poem, as you said. But it's true. It could also have, if you had just chosen to write it differently on the page, it would have looked like a prose poem maybe, which is the same thing as a micro fiction. So, or a micro essay. So I wondered if you wanted to talk about just the fun of sort of deciding what is the right form for the images and the story that's coming to you, and how you go through that process.
I think with that one in particular, I actually wrote it originally as, my intention was for it to be flash nonfiction, because I've been trying to get more flash nonfiction out there. And it didn't get picked up, so I lineated it, and I just decided that Honda sounded better than Toyota because my sister does not own a Toyota or a Honda. So I made it into a poem. It's very much a prose poem. I mean, it's prosy. Although I think when I first started writing it, I had more repetition. It was far more lyrical. I was playing more with rhythm, and was actually trying to work in more formal elements, trying to get the iams to come through, and it just wasn't working. And I think I don't know, that one I struggled with a lot, and ultimately it was more fun for me to read broken into lines. I think, and I was just reading it on the screen, as you could probably tell. And there's just some enjoyment. I mean, it's not a happy poem, but there's some enjoyment about the turns of the lines. And I have it's all very staggered. And it just, because it can be kind of plotting and it can be very sad, I think rather than have it in block prose format, having it lineated kind of brings a little enjoyment to it. And maybe that lifts it a little bit, because it is sad. It's a very sad poem. I think I almost start writing, I mean, I write from memory, I write from experience, but I'm a pretty good liar too. So most of my poems are not true. Obviously they're based on some truth, because everything we write is filtered through us, and all our experiences are filtered through us. So in a way, almost everything is based on our real lives. But when I initially, start writing a poem draft, it's a memory, it's an experience, and I don't have to be stuck in the in the perimeters of truth. And if it's nonfiction, it's truth. It can be very lyrical. It can be, I mean, it's by definition of the genre, it's prose, but it's in paragraph form. But the one thing it has to be is true. And so when the pavement poem, I pretty much stuck to the truth, except for the car, the make of the car. So yeah, I laugh, but it's kind of, sometimes a lot of the things I've been writing lately, if I can exercise brevity more successfully, which sometimes I have trouble with, it can eventually become a poem on the page. But if I'm really trying to get the truth out there and I want to get in all those details, I keep it as prose and I try to submit it as flash nonfiction. So.
Wow, I was not expecting that answer. I was thinking so much about form on the page, maybe because we just talked about sestinas. But so you make an interesting point that I've thought about a lot, because I have a lot of poet friends. People, when people read poetry, they always assume that it's true. Or they don't, I shouldn't say they always, but a lot of readers assume that the poetry is true. And of course, it might not be, and probably often isn't. And because you do have that flexibility to play with it in a way that, well, depending on who you talk to, but generally the way that you don't if you're doing creative nonfiction. And to me, when you were talking, it almost came through to me like that there's a kind of a struggle in you that if you want to start playing a little bit with it, if you want to start fictionalizing a little bit, because you know that you'll get closer to what you actually want to say if you can fictionalize a bit, then to you that says, okay, poem. Whereas if you have to stay truthful, then that says to you, okay, essay. Which is, that's so much more sort of internal than I expected. I mean, it's always internal, but I just thought it was going to be more about the look of it on the page. So I'm really fascinated by that answer.
It's that too, but I don't want to diminish, these two very different forms, right? Genres. So I guess this is usually what I go through when I am intending to write nonfiction, and sometimes when I can see that I can really get the music going, and the lyricism is overpowering the actual sentence structure, then it seems to make a better poem. And if I can somehow try to squeeze it into form, which would be great, because I'm trying to work more of form and failing. But if I can make one of these moments and memories into a sonnet, that'd be great. But sometimes I do both. Sometimes there's a poem and a flash nonfiction basically about the same thing, but they're obviously very different, but it's still the same moment.
Yeah. Well, here's to failing, right? Because writing's all about failing. But I also want to just quickly make sure that I reassure you, you have not in any way sounded like you're diminishing either of those genres in the way that you're talking about them. So please don't worry about that. So again, I'm taking up lots of airs. Anyone like to say something before I attack Nancy with my question? Nope. All right, Nancy. So I don't want to encourage a spoiler or anything, but when I was reading your piece, and then again when I was listening to it, I'm suspicious of this page fellow. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if I'm reading into it because of my own personality, or if you are intentionally making him a little bit ambiguous, which gets to sort of a bigger question of how you make your characters sort of fully dimensional, because I was also impressed that in such a tiny space you made me think a lot about that character and what might be going on with him.
Well, we certainly feel as ambiguous to Laya, and since we see the situation through her eyes, I felt like it was sort of important to sort of for people to feel that. I mean, because she doesn't really know that much about this guy. Like, is he a thief? He is, by the way. What is he here for? What's in that box under his arm? So there's a lot of uncertainty there for her, and that's, I think, where a lot of ambiguity comes from. And also there's just the fact that his presence is really meant to unsettle her in a lot of ways, because, you know, she's sort of in this stage of adolescence in her life where she wants to push further, but feels like she's constantly being pulled back and told no. And then you have someone that walks in that clearly is a little older and clearly has a little more freedom. And he also clearly is the type of person to, you know, rather ask forgiveness than ask permission. And so, like, there is that aspect about him that unsettles her as well. So yeah, he is meant to be ambiguous in the beginning of this story.
Okay, great. Well, it's nice to know that you've thought through it all so carefully. That is all a very intentional labor of love there, the craft of that. And I also wondered, I was thinking as you were reading, I started to get a sort of a meta feel about what you were writing, because you were talking about how the character has to repeat and repeat and repeat, like the paper doll has to repeat whatever they're set out to do. And I thought, I wonder if you're sort of playing with mythology and folklore in that way, because there are so many tropes that get repeated and repeated and repeated, and that, you know, you're hoping to sort of play with that and also kind of explode it a little bit. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, maybe not intentionally in that aspect. Oh wait, no, I'll say yes, that was totally intentional. But I'm not, but yeah, I mean, I am like sort of playing with this perspective that we have in a lot of mythology and sort of like these traditional stories, especially you know, ones, you know, sometimes written by men, of like this sort of glamorization of this female character who's willing to like sacrifice and kill herself, you know, over loss of this man in the tale, which the story later touches on lightly. I mean, it's meant to be more of a humorous story overall. But yeah, it does, you know, sort of touch on the sort of trends that you tend to find in these sort of folklore stories.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know last night we talked a little bit with Anthony about tropes and kind of the meta, like writing stories about stories sometimes, which I mean, the whole kind of conceit of yours of her coming out of this book. I mean, that's just something I always have so much fun with, seeing how different people are kind of aware of the traditions that they're writing in, and then use the writing to engage with that, to reinterpret it. Exactly like you were saying, to kind of look at what other people have done and be like, okay, now let's twist it a little bit and see it from a new angle. And it's always just so fascinating to see how people work with that idea.
You have to make it your own some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, like as the body of literature grows within a genre or tradition, the way it's almost like a conversation across writers. So we're coming up on time. Does anyone have any final thoughts that they would like to say before we sign off? No? All right. But yeah, so just one more time, thank you to all three of you, and to Anthony as well for joining us last time. This series happens because Maine has so many fantastic writers who are willing to share their work, and the community that can come together for this. So we do it exactly for these opportunities, and it's an honor to be a part of it. As we said, thank you to Courtney and Quiet City for supporting us. Things look a little different during a time of pandemic, but her bookstore has been just a supporter of us and the arts in Lewiston, Auburn in general. Also to the Lewiston Public Library and to all of our viewers for tuning in now or tuning in later. Our entire 2020 season can be viewed on Facebook, on YouTube, on our website. So you can go back and watch past ones, share it with other people. One benefit of doing it digitally is we can be viewed from anywhere in the world. So share this and tune in next month. September 18th and 19th, our theme will be shadows, and we'll be bringing a new selection of readers sharing their work on that theme. And also next Friday, Local Writers Read is partnering with LA Arts for their art walk for August. And so we will be doing a genre spotlight there as well, with some more flash readings. So lots going on, even though it all looks a bit different this time. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in and enjoy your weekend. And we will be back next time.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Much.
Thank you.